Professor Chess videos. This is the second part of the video about the center from the Fred Reinfeld Complete Chess Course. Hey, I got my book for $5. I'm excited. It's worth $5 information for sure. This particular discussion of the importance of the center is using the Nimzo Indian defense. It's a very illustrative, cool game that Reinfeld illustrates with this. Knight, king, bishop 3, pawn, queen, bishop 4, pawn, king 3. Typical Nimzo Indian, right? Knight, queen, bishop 3, and now the bishop comes all the way down here and puts the question to the knight, pins the knight to the king. Well, what do? You put the pawn to the king 3, and the pawn comes up to the queen 4. Notice the central thrust. This is important. Pawn, queen, rook 3. He's going to put the question to the bishop right now. He wants to resolve the situation, either move back, get out of the way, or take the knight. And he takes the knight. In this particular situation, this puts black in some difficulty. Pawn takes the bishop. Now the white has the doubled pawns, right? There's still excellent support here for that central pawn, however. So these doubled pawns are not a weakness. Not at this stage. No chance. Don't let that psychology fool you. I know there's a lot of people that say doubled pawns are a weakness. In this sense, it's not. It's given extra support, and this is critical because white, in order to win this game, wants to advance his king pawn. But when he advances it, he doesn't drop it, he advances it. When he advances it, he loses the support of the queen pawn. However, because he took the knight, his queen pawn still has support, and this frees up white to push the king pawn further up the center of the board. This is the critical aspect of this particular game, right? Center, power, and dominance. This is very interesting to watch. Now, he can't just immediately start pushing the king pawn. He has to prepare for it. So this is how you prepare. I love the step-by-step showing the various different moves that prepare for that central thrust. You can't do it without support. Otherwise, you're going to lose your center, right? So that's what he's talking about. The white pawn takes the pawn, first off, and the pawn returns the favor and takes the pawn, right? Now, the bishop comes up to queen 3. These are preparatory moves to moving the king pawn. Look how this supports. See, the knight's hitting that square, the e4 square. You can't just push the pawn, the knight's going to take it. So one of the preparatory moves is the bishop. You develop a piece, you prepare the castle, you keep the center strong. This is excellent chess here. Pay attention to what they're doing here. Pawn, queen, knight 3. He's going to fianchetto his queen bishop. Why not? It comes right through the center, right to that square where his pawn wants to go. So see, black's not just letting white do what he wants. He's going to fight him for this center influence. This is critical to be able to do. Well, knight comes up here to king 2. And the bishop, instead of going to this square, goes to the a6 to challenge this bishop, which is holding on to this square to helping that pawn advance. So either way, he's directly challenging his central thrust. White is trying to prepare, black is trying to break down his preparation. This is cool how this works. White goes ahead and castles. Pawn to bishop 4. Now he's bringing up more space. He's going to use the pawns to try to break up the power in the center. Not the pieces, the pawns. Right? Now, knight comes up here to knight 3. You see how every move of white is designed to help him push the king pawn up. Now the knight hits e4. The bishop hits e4. The knight is hitting e4. The d5 is hitting e4. The bishop is threatening the bishop that hits d. You see how this interplay works. They're fighting for a square and a central thrust. White in favor, black says nothing to it. This is great to see how they do this. So, now if I didn't lose my place, and I probably did, rook king 1. There it is again. The open file, hitting that square. See how this works? This is so interesting how it works. Everything depends on white being able to push that pawn up. So he pushes the bishop pawn up. One more support because he has so many people fighting against him. He's doing everything he can to maintain the power of moving through that center. If white can get to where he moves through that center, he's going to win this game. Black knows it, so he's doing everything he can to prevent it. So he pushes the pawn to bishop 3 to support that square. And now his queen comes to bishop 2 because he needs to develop his queen and get his other knight out here and get this other rook into this game if he's going to prevent white from doing that pawn thrust. Now the bishop takes the bishop and the knight takes the bishop. Now they're starting to change down the powers to give him the ability to move that pawn up to the center. Now the queen comes up to queen 3. Again, every move these guys are making is based on this pawn moving to that square. Isn't that fascinating? So queen moves up to queen 3. Knight drops back to knight 1. He's back on his original square. Now the bishop comes up to queen 2. He's going to connect his rooks so he can get his rooks on those central files, right? And knight comes back up to bishop 3. He's going to try to hit this center a little harder. And now he's got it to where he can advance that pawn to king 4. And now he pushes that pawn. This is a very difficult situation for black. If he captures white's king pawn right now with his queen pawn, then white recaptures with his king bishop pawn, and he still has the central pawn structure to move forward, right? This maintains white's overwhelming presence in the center, which is what's going to win this game. White continues on with his central advance, and black isn't able to stop him. Queen rook comes to queen 1. Pawn continues to king 5. And now he's starting to chase away some of the defenders of, guess who? Look at this board position. He has been so in tune with trying to make this pawn advance with his army, and black has been trying so hard to fight it that the king is virtually all alone. Did you notice that? That's why we want to pay attention to the board position after every single move. We want to Chessercise the board. And you can do this just briefly, but notice where all of his power is, right? His king's over here. All his army's over there. There are hardly any defenders around this guy. And the knight itself comes over to queen 2. Look how alone that king is. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? You have to say, wait a minute. I got my king pawn going forward. Why not my other pawn? Let's go break down the king's fortress. The knight comes over to rook 4. The knight here comes up to rook 5. And you know why, right? There's no guesswork here. The fight is on. The king is coming. The king is going to be attacked here. He forces the weakening of the king's side. The dark squares are now weak because this pawn that was protecting them had to move to chase the knight away. because there's going to be a checkmate coming up if he doesn't get rid of that knight. In the process, he weakens his king side, and white takes great advantage of that. Pawn continues with bishop 5. He's going to take away the pawn structure. Pawn takes the knight, and you go, wait a minute, why on earth would you let him take the knight instead? Watch. He's got a central thrust, right? Watch this. This is so interesting because by sacrificing the knight, he has a weakness that he can come and cut off the king's escape with the bishop. That square became weak. That becomes a great point to put one of your powers. He's focusing on the weaknesses that were created because he got the central thrust. Isn't that interesting? King goes to rook 1. Pawn goes to bishop 6. He's still pushing those blasted pawns. Isn't that a wicked looking pawn chain? I mean, that's a beautiful thing. This is the fence that corrals all of white's army over there and separates the entire army from the king himself. Wow! That is so fun to watch happen, isn't it? This is incredible. Rook comes to king knight 1. Someone's got to come and help this king out, or he is in deep trouble. Bishop knight 7, check. What an outpost. What a beautiful end to that pawn chain. Of course, the only option, he wins the exchange, you got to lose the rook. Pawn takes the rook, check. King goes to knight 1. Now, the rook comes up and takes the pawn. He's got the open file. He's got weaknesses all around his king. Come and take it. Why not? Because look at what it does. He's got the queen over to come to here. He's got his other rook to come over to here in case the king takes the rook. It's not really going to help him out at all anyway. The only thing he really can do is queen bishop 3 to try to get over here. You notice how the army's pieces are not cooperating together. They've been shutting the queen out. There's no way to get into this fight because they've been corralled away from the king, and so the kingside attack works beautifully. Queen rook comes to king bishop 1. Fantastic. Notice how he's using his rooks and his entire army here. Fabulous. Queen comes over to rook 3. The queen's got to get over here, but she's a little bit too late because now the queen comes up to bishop 5, and you can see the overwhelming slaughter. Knight to queen bishop 3 comes up to here. No, he doesn't. He brings this knight to queen bishop 3. He's virtually given up at this point. That does nothing for him. And now, of course, the rook takes the knight because it's a free knight. And you can see where the checkmate is next. There's nothing he can do. If he goes to here, it doesn't matter. He's coming to here to checkmate the king. That's a fantastic illustration of the critical importance of the center, of utilizing the center, of emphasizing the center, of dominating the center, which essentially, for all intents and purposes, as you've seen in the illustrations, it scatters your opponent's army. In this case, white's center divide line beautifully separated the goat from the sheep. Didn't it? That's a spectacular example and sample. Now, there's thousands of different ways to learn how to control the center and use the center. This is why we want to play through the master games and the grandmaster games by the thousands. Jeremy Silman says tens of thousands. Talk about intimidating. I mean, that'll take us years. But if we want to improve our chess, that's what it takes. We'll begin to see the patterns. We'll begin to see the numerous creative ways that people fight tooth and nail for the center. And the winner in the center, the one who controls it, dominates it, uses it, occupies it, usually ends up winning the game. Usually by some spectacular sacrifices like that knight and that rook sacrifice. So that's another really cool instruction to help us improve our chess. This is a fun Chessercise for me. I love doing these kind of games and analyzing the various foundational concepts. We repeat them over and over and over again because with every new game of chess we look at, study, and analyze, break the board down and Chessercise it, with every game we receive further instruction. And, hey, we become better chess players. So, thanks for watching my video. Happy Chessercising, happy checkmating, and I will see you in the next video.